Thank you so much for joining us today for the Pastor's Potluck Podcast. Here on the Pastor's Potluck, it's similar to a normal potluck where you might get something that you want and there may be something that you just want to pass up altogether. And that's okay. There's something here for everybody. Our goal here is to encourage you and maybe in the process entertain you. If you're ready, let's dig in. Well, thank you once again for joining us for another episode of the Pastor's Potluck Podcast. I'm joined today by Pastor Scott. We got a good one for you today. We're kind of slowly, it feels like we're getting back into a normal routine, like as summer's coming down to the end.
Yeah, summer was crazy. With people's vacations and Pastor Cheryl on sabbatical and just, our personal schedule with Landon playing in an all-star tournament that was, kind of a daytime thing, which is kind of interesting to do in the middle of the summer. And so everything has been able to shift back almost to normal, it feels like, for now. Hopefully for the for the remainder of the fall and whatnot, we can kind of get back in a rhythm and a good groove of life.
And then also like good. 4 weeks of camps that we've had, youth camp and then kids camp and then
summer celebration. It was all awesome too. Like I was out there for 2 of the weeks. It was awesome ministry being done, but also really exhausting especially because I'm not much of a camp person. So the beds are a little difficult to negotiate with, and lots of bugs and camp food and all the stuff that comes along with being at camp. It's made for really awesome ministry, but also just like kind of draining. And it was like this week's been nice to have everyone back in the office and just being in meetings where people aren't missing. So it's been good.
Or having to do it through Zoom or something because everybody's all over the place. Now, one of the things that we were a part of, I guess, like as a team, so to speak, and it was more of like a team effort, was our summer celebration that we had this past week. I just want to say that if you weren't able to make it to one of our services, you absolutely missed out on just an incredible time that we had. We had local pastors from all around the state be able to come in and preach, and then one of our elders, Hope Meadows, preached one of the nights, and it was just it was good to be able to have church services away from the normal and be able to create new friendships and new relationships with other people from the Church of God movement here in West Virginia, but then also just to be in God's presence. I mean, goodness gracious. I mean, it was just almost tangible. Like you could just reach out and just feel him like being there. It was just great.
It was. It was a really good week of ministry. So I was really energized by it, even though, as the organizer of it was draining, but then the services and what was going on was also really refreshing and energizing as well. So like by the end of the week, I was tired, but like at the start of this week, I was energized because of what we had experienced that week, and it was like kind of the boost that I needed to finish summer off and get into fall ministry mode, get my mind focused on what's coming up next. And so it was like I hit the ground running on Monday, just fully filled up and scheduled, I felt like 15 meetings and just all these initiatives starting to push and getting things done. And so it was just, it was exactly what I needed. That's the cool thing about summer celebration is it comes in at the end of summer, right when you need that breath of fresh air from the Lord. It gives you what you need to get into that new season of ministry. Yeah,
it's kind of like at a point to where, like, not saying this in a negative way, but like momentum seems to you don't feel as much progress.
Yeah.
It's not that we're not moving forward and still trying to make things happen, but the progress, it feels like it slows just a little bit, but it helps just kind of sustain that momentum, but also kind of give you fresh eyes on a lot of things, and being able to still do ministry, but step away from constantly showing up here in the building. And then whenever you do get back in the building, you're like, man, we have been doing really well at what we've been doing.
Yeah.
It's been good.
Yeah.
So one of the things I wanted to talk to you about is, we've kind of gone back and forth with picking apart the Bible and talking about leadership. And I wanted to get back into our conversation about leadership. And, excuse me, I wanted to talk a little bit about the importance of culture in an organization, and why it's important to have a great culture, especially, I mean, and this could be applied for anything, not in just ministry, but just the importance of culture for an organization or a business, and why you need to hold it at such a high standard.
Yeah, well, I know one of the points that you want to point out is that culture is what drives an organization.
Yes.
Like, the culture is what the leadership of the organization allows it to be. And if you have a healthy culture, the organization is going to be healthy. If you have a negative, unhealthy culture, your organization may be successful for a season, but it won't sustain success, because ultimately people won't want to be a part of something that's unhealthy. So culture ends up being the thing that attracts people to your organization, retains them in your organization, and helps them be successful in your organization, because it's the thing that they can contribute to, but it's also something that they kind of feed off of as well. Nobody wants to be a part of an organization that is draining to be a part of.
Yeah.
Right? Nobody wants to show up if there's constantly conflict brewing, if there's constantly disorganization, disunity. Nobody wants to be a part of that. Nobody wants to be a part of a culture that is toxic and negative, where, people are being berated and talked down upon. Nobody wants to be in a part of a culture where they're not able to use their gifts. And, no one wants to be a part of those types of cultures. And that's why having a healthy culture is one of the most important things that a leader can focus on in their leadership. And it's interesting because sometimes culture management for a leader doesn't look like you're doing very much work on paper, because you're not checking a bunch of boxes.
Yeah.
In regards of productivity. But it's still one of the most important things as a leader that you could possibly do, whether you're the leader of an organization, leader of a church, leader of a team, leader of a volunteer team at the church. Like, your culture of that team will ultimately determine the success long term of that team. And sometimes a lot of the work that goes into building a culture doesn't really feel much like you're being productive, because it's happening in meetings, and it's happening in what we say a lot around here. It's happening a lot in working on the ministry rather than just working in the ministry. If all I'm ever accomplishing throughout the week is enough to keep my head above water to make sure that Sunday happens or whatever it is, well, then I'm not ultimately contributing to the culture of my organization to make it healthy for the long term. And this is one of the things, like, as a leader and as a pastor, we do regular one-on-ones here with our staff. I meet with our staff. It used to be every other week. That got to be a little cumbersome and a bit much, where I felt like we were having the same conversations over and over. So now they're moving to about every 6 to 8 weeks. But we do that to serve the employee, to help them make sure that they have an idea of what's being expected, but also gives them a way to feed back into the organization anything that might be going on. And it's a good culture check. So we'll ask questions like, hey, how is it going for you here inside the organization? What are you experiencing? How are things going? Is there any tensions or anything like that we need to know about? Like, did you have a bad experience with someone on staff? If so, then you know that meeting is that place that you can kind of let that stuff fly, and then the leader becomes aware of the need to go and address certain situations that we're not always privy to having that information. So sometimes the work does look a lot like sitting down and talking. Some of the work is sitting down and in staff meetings and having these conversations of what do we value the most, and coming up with values, because culture helps drive your organization, but your culture is ultimately defined by what you allow in the organization.
Yeah.
And what you allow in the organization either will be very intentional by having values that drive that behavior, or it will be very unintentional by whatever you allow is the culture that you create.
Yeah. Your values that you hold near and dear drives your culture. If you value attendance, then the culture should dictate that people are showing up and being present or in person or whatever. If you value leadership development, then there should be some way that you can look at the development that's happening. Hey, are you having these conversations? How are you leading them whenever you're having those moments? But for us, as a nonprofit and as a church, our values tend to differ slightly from maybe something that would be that you would find out in the secular world, maybe like with a business, somebody that does banking or something else. But for us, our values are we are better together. We never stop growing, and we put we before me. Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about how the values of Southridge Church drive the culture here.
Yeah. Yeah, and so, what I'll say is our values, though there are not very many of them compared to most organizational structures, and most organizations might have more, our values would play very well in any organization.
Yeah.
And they were intentionally set up like that. Even though they are made for a church, there's nothing inherently spiritual that wouldn't, transfer to another organization. And so that's one of the strong suits of our values.
Well, I think it's amazing too that if you can take a step back, and because some people will say, "Man, we value everything."
Yeah.
Okay. And whenever you say things like that, you're not laser focused in doing one thing. You're moving in all these different directions. So if you could take your values and kind of compress them down to 3, 5, 6 things, then your organization is always going to be moving towards those values as well.
Yeah, and sorry, so our values, even though we see them deeply rooted in Scripture, they're also just very transferable principles no matter what your organization or team is. And we've actually found that the values that we hold as a church as a whole also play well for our staff. Like sometimes you'll have a different set of staff values, but even the 3 that we have as our overall organization also play well on the staff level and help drive a positive culture and help us have something to look at. And so for us, we're managing 2 different cultures at Southridge Church. We're managing the culture of the church. When I say that, I mean all the people that make up Southridge Church. We're managing that culture, but we're also managing the culture of the church staff as far as at the end of the day, this is a workplace for those of us that have jobs here. And just like any other workplace, if we don't manage the culture, then it will not be an enjoyable place to work, and people won't want to work here, or they won't be as effective as they could be. And so our values have really shaped both of those arenas, and I can see it, especially when it comes to our church. I can see how our values have played key roles in honestly not having to deal with some of the nonsense that my friends in ministry will tell me, like horror stories about what's going on at their church and whatnot.
Yeah, and I've experienced that with other places that I've worked at.
Yeah, and I'll go like, oh, wow, we're really blessed here that we have values that we regularly go back to and talk about, so the way people understand who we are and what we're about, that it allows them to decide whether or not this is an organization that they want to identify with and be a part of, because we don't necessarily function like some churches have in the past. So, like, one of our core values that is a big sticking point for us is we before me. This helps us to create a culture where people realize that the church does not exist for them and them alone. That we are not just here to serve your needs and meet all of your preferences.
Yeah.
The church is here for Jesus, first off, and then second off, it is to meet the needs of our community and of others. And when everyone puts other people first, then eventually someone's putting you first as well, and everyone gets their needs met. And so we don't have major issues. I mean, they'll pop up from time to time where people are fighting for their own personal preferences and going, well, why don't we do this or why don't we do that or whatnot? And it's like, listen, here, what we're going to do at Southridge Church is we're going to put other people first. We're going to put we before me. We're going to put what's best for the most people first. And if that doesn't line up with our preferences, then it just doesn't line up with our preferences. Like that's, and then all it is we have to realize that our preferences, it's okay to have preferences. There's nothing wrong with having preferences. It's just not going to fly if you insist that your preferences be the decision-making factor for our church. That's not the lens that we're looking through. We're looking through like, okay, what if we make this decision, how many people does it positively affect? How many people does it negatively affect? And those are the decisions that we have to make. Like, if you don't like our music, well, the vast majority of people do, so we're not going to change in that regards. Now, if we found out that there was a more effective way musically to reach more people, then we would change, because we're not married to the method whatsoever of what we're doing here. We're more married to the message of what's behind all of this. And so We Before Me helps us stave off a lot of problems that I know are present in a lot of churches, where everyone wants to have their preference. Everyone wants the carpet to be this color, the walls to be this color. We want you to have this program, or we want you to have that program. And if you don't have this program, and yada, 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 it's like, look, that may be the way that it was at another church that you've been a part of, where, sometimes you get people pleasers in leadership roles. And if you're a people pleaser, you'll succumb to a lot of yeses that you should have said no to.
Yeah.
And then you'll end up worn out and ineffective and whatnot. So you might have been at a church with a people pleaser that just said yes to everything, and so you always got your preference. Well, that leads to a very ineffective church ultimately, with a really unhealthy church culture, because, I mean, we know, just logically, not everyone can have their way. Like, that just doesn't work. Like, not everyone can have their way. And so we just decided here that we're going to put others before ourselves in that regards. And even if it's not what I like, then it is what it is.
Yeah.
Like, there are certain things, and I've told people this ever since I've been one of the lead pastors here, is there are things about Southridge that it's not my preference. There are songs that we sing. There are things that we do. There are things that I feel like as the pastor that I'm obligated to do, and all sorts of stuff that I don't necessarily like. And it's not my preference, but it's what's best for the most good. Like, so I'm willing to, on a lot of these things, go, you know what? That's fine. If this is what's best for the most good, and we're going to have the most. So, like, we've tried to make it clear, like, Southridge Church is not a collection of all the favorites and preferences of the staff here. It's a collection of the things that we think will be most effective at helping people take their next steps to follow Jesus. And so so even those of us in leadership on some level are having to live out We Before Me, because though we do probably get to shape and mold ministry more than the average person, because that's what God's asked us to do here, there are still things that we have to go, I don't necessarily like that, but enough people do for it to be effective, and so therefore I can be okay with it.
I think that happens probably once a week for at least somebody on staff through our meetings, but we all have this team mentality. I mean, because if you look at everybody on staff, we all come from different walks of life, different life experiences, and different perspectives on maybe how things should be done. But whenever we work together, we understand that our effectiveness is greater together as opposed to trying to fight against the grain or be apart and doing things on our own.
Yeah.
It's just the importance of just being a team player.
Yeah. So at the church level, it's worked to stave off some of those personal preference type issues that a lot of church has. On the staff level, We Before Me has helped us to be able to do exactly what you said. Well, it may not be the way that I like it, but if that's the way that you're going to run your ministry, then I can support that.
Yeah, and what can I do to support it and further the vision? That
we kind of live by the rule and have lived by the rule here. We will privately challenge each other on things that maybe we're not in support of or disagree about or think that should be done different. We will privately challenge those things, whereas we will also publicly champion whatever the team's decision is.
100%.
And that has to be the way that you, in a healthy organization, that's how it happens. You privately challenge and you publicly champion. In unhealthy organizations, which we've all been a part of things like this, you may privately challenge and then you will also publicly challenge. You'll say things like in public in front of other people, well, I'm not sure why they made this decision, but I guess I'll just go with it. Well, I don't really like that they did this. No, you can do that privately with the person making the decision, but in front of your team and in front of others, you go, I'm 100% on board for this, because that's how healthy organizations have to operate. I privately challenge, and when I've come to an understanding that, okay, maybe there is a reason why they're doing this or why they're not doing this or whatever it is, then even though I might disagree with it, I can still publicly champion it because I've had my opportunity, and I don't have to drag that organization or that leader through the mud to other people because I've had my opportunity privately, and now as a healthy part of an organization, I'm going to publicly champion whatever it is. So I'm not going to go have side conversations and go like, oh, I can't believe that they've made this decision or whatnot. No, you had your chance privately to challenge, and now it's time to put on your big girl pants, big boy pants, and go publicly champion whatever the decision is for the sake of the organization. And so that's where like We Before Me has really helped as a staff, is we're thinking about each other first, and how does this decision that I'm about to make, how is that going to affect everyone else on staff? How does my absence here, or how does this programming decision, like if I'm going to have a group on Wednesday night and all the other groups are being done at one time, but I want to be done and start at one time and start, how does that one programming decision affect absolutely everyone else? And therefore you might make a different decision based on that, because you're thinking of others and not just, well, this is what works for me, so get in line or shut up and move on, like that type of thing. So We Before Me works at the larger church level to help people realize that the church is not just here to let them have their way with whatever they want. And then on the staff level, it keeps us all in check with one another, knowing that every decision that we make affects everyone else around the table in some way, shape, or form. If we go after a certain volunteer that's volunteering in another area, we understand that is going to be it's going to affect someone else. But if it's the right move, then all of us can get on board with it and go, no, that's the right move. That person should be in that ministry. I release them to you because I know that ultimately what's good for everyone is the best option.
Yeah.
Even if it means, well, now I'm going to have to find new people, go through new training and all that. That's just the way that we have chose to operate as a staff, is we've got to put the needs of others first. And so that's value driven. That comes from the fact that this is the way that we want to operate. And then we get that value straight from the scriptures, right from Jesus, who said, look, I came to serve and not be served. He put other people's needs before his own. We see Philippians chapter 2, have the same mind as Christ, who was in every way, shape, and form God, did not consider his equality with God something that he had to hold on to and lord over people's heads, but rather he sacrificed all of that for us, and became one just like us and all of this. And it's like, so when you look at Jesus, you see We Before Me modeled out his whole life. When he goes to the Garden of Gethsemane and he's literally his sweating drops of blood because he's under so much emotional turmoil at this moment because of the cross and everything he's getting ready to go through, and he's going, oh, Lord, not my will, but but yours be done. Like, okay, God, this is going to suck for me.
Yeah.
But sounds like it's going to be really good for everyone else.
Yeah.
So I guess I'll go ahead and do that. So we before me is the way of the cross.
Yeah.
This may not be my preference to go and, let the Romans beat me half to death and drive a nail through my wrist, through literally the most excruciating part of my arm, and then through my feet, and maybe I don't want to go through that.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I accomplished salvation for everyone that would come to me by faith. So maybe a little bit of sacrifice and not getting my way in this moment is worth it.
Yeah.
And so we before me is just simply the way of the cross. So it has worked at our organizational level, it works at our staff level, and ultimately we see it scripturally. And so that's just one example of how our values help drive our culture. Like, we have one of our values here is we never stop growing. And yes, that works at the church level, because our mission, which has changed a little bit from where we were focused on being the perfect place for imperfect people to become fully devoted followers of Jesus Christ, which we still are that, but it's really not our mission, because it's changed so much over the last 3 years, where we don't want to be so place-focused that we're no longer people-focused.
Yeah.
We don't want to be the right place. Rather than focusing on creating the right place for people, let's focus on how do we create the right type of people. How do we disciple people in a way that they're experiencing life change in Jesus. And so we never stop growing works for our discipleship track. And how, listen, we are all about you growing spiritually. We say that in the terms of taking next steps. That's what we're about. And so we are structuring ministry in a way to help you take next steps.
Yeah.
I see this all over our church. We got rid of our Wednesday night service during COVID, and it hasn't always been the most popular decision. Especially, there was a time back in the day that we tried to get rid of a Wednesday night service. This would have been back close to the beginning of my time in ministry here, and it was a disaster.
Yeah.
It was a big fight, and people left the church and wrote angry letters and all kinds of stuff like that. But this time, it was no, not everyone liked it, but here's the deal. We're all about helping you take next steps. We didn't think the Wednesday night service was helping people take next steps at the same level as other opportunities that we could say yes to. And now we've got a bunch of small groups happening on Wednesday nights where I can see, because I'm a part of it, things really happening.
Yeah, I want to brag on the worship team and their willingness to kind of change and kind of do what's better for the church as a whole. Because for the longest time, there was been worship rehearsal on Wednesday nights, and we haven't made the switch yet. But just clearly talking to them and just being open and honest, and kind of like the decision that I've been stewing with for probably about a year. We had started talking about it whenever you started the book club a year ago. And just to be able to open up the door for more opportunities for the worship center to be utilized for next steps, growth in your faith journey. We made the decision and have been talking about it, and everybody knows, and we're going to start our rehearsals on Monday nights just so people can grow in their faith.
Yeah, literally that one decision highlights both core values that we've talked about.
Yeah.
It's we before me, because not all of the people on that team wanted to go to Monday nights. That sort of change, people don't like change. By and large. So even if they could do Monday, even just changing to Monday, it changes everything.
Yeah.
It's I used to have Mondays, I'm up here on Sundays helping lead worship, and then now I got to come back on Mondays. That's a big ask for people. And they said, you know what? Because it will allow people the chance to continue to grow and take next steps, we'll do that. So that's we before me, and we never stop growing, because, again, these aren't just values that we put up on a wall. That way when people walk in, they're like, oh, wow, those are – we try to make decisions based on these. That's creating the culture. And so on that team, if there was someone that decision didn't work really well for, but they still did it anyways, well, those people that will now be able to get into discipleship groups on Wednesday night know that the people on their team did that for them, for their own spiritual development, for their own spiritual growth. That's a healthy thing to have on the team.
Yeah.
So we made the decision to get rid of a Wednesday night service so that way we could have a bunch of discipleship groups on Wednesday night that are really, I think in the smaller group, people are having more success having real conversations and whatnot, because the Wednesday night service for us amounted to another opportunity to worship and teach. But given the way that, all the things that are available to us on the internet, like you could do that any day of the week. Like if you want, I'm telling you, if you want to find a sermon to listen to because you need another sermon throughout the week, well, the internet is full of a lot of good ones. Like, so we didn't feel like we were meeting a need that couldn't be met in a very simple way elsewhere. If you need another night of 3 songs or whatnot, we'll get Spotify, right? I mean, and I'm not trying to be critical of it, but I'm saying those things are all available to you.
Yeah.
What might not be readily available to you on Wednesday night? Community.
Yeah.
And I know people would say that the Wednesday night service, that was community. No, y'all, we were sitting in a service for an hour. You can't talk to each other.
No.
And that you might talk before or after, but now think about this. Now that we're in small groups, you talk before the group, you talk during the group, you talk after the group. Which one seems to be making more connections relationally and then helping you walk? So, and again, that was a decision that some people just said, okay, I don't necessarily like it, but if we're going to be about what we're about, then that's what we're going to do. And it hasn't been a big fuss whatsoever. It hasn't. I'm sure there are people that have heartburn about it or whatnot, but they understand the mission, vision, and values of the church, and they go, okay, this is just what it's going to be. And so church as a whole, we never stop growing. And then we talk about this on the staff level, that we never stop growing. And we talk pretty open and honest about this, that if as a staff, especially as a staff member, because we work for an organization where our salaries are paid for 100% by the generosity of the people that come to this church.
Yeah.
And so therefore, we're not like a business that can go out and raise money as far as let's go out and sell more stuff so the way we can hire a bigger staff. Like the amount of money that we have to spend on staff kind of is fixed until the church grows at a point that, it is what it is. So to work here is a huge honor, and we only have so much money to pay people to work here. And so therefore we have to be making sure that the people that are getting those salaries are the best possible people for those positions. So we talk about it just real honest here at the staff. Listen, if you don't do stuff to develop yourself personally and never stop growing, to live out our culture, you will eventually not be able to work here. And that's not because the church is some cruel, awful, nasty place. It's somebody somewhere is sacrificing to fund your salary.
Yeah.
And so we have to have the best possible person there. That's just that's the only way to look at your church and say, I'm doing the best I can with the money that you're entrusting to us. And so if you have a staff member that doesn't want to grow, doesn't want to develop, wants to be the same year after year after year, they're not reading books, they're not listening to podcasts, they're not interested in going to conferences, and you just don't see any growth whatsoever, eventually, I know that people don't agree with churches letting staff go, but that's just the reality. We do that to be good stewards of your money that you're entrusting to the Lord through the local church.
Yeah.
And so we talk a lot about never stop growing. And I feel like as the leader, I set the culture for that. Like I need the staff of this church to see how much I'm pouring in to personal development, so that way then they'll be challenged to say okay, I'm going to have to really take serious this whole thing. When I first came into church ministry and really just into adulthood in general, I'm not a reader whatsoever. I hate to read.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I started at the church, I would know people, people just read a lot in ministry, people that I would just be like, y'all, outside of things that were mandatory for school.
Yeah.
And even a lot of those times, I was smart enough to figure out my way around them without ever reading them. I don't know that I ever just sat down and read a book in my life outside of Dr. Seuss or something. That wasn't me whatsoever. But I would never have been able to go from the middle school director in 2011 to the lead pastor of this church now in 2022 if I didn't figure out a discipline for reading and having more input than the amount that I put out. Right?
Yeah.
Because as a communicator, if you've got to have like a communicator that's trying to grow an audience and grow a church, and not for the sake of having a big church, but being able to impact more people to spiritually grow. If you're not putting in more than what you're pouring out, then you'll never have anything interesting to say to people.
Yeah.
Or the interesting things that you do have to say to people will run out in like your first 2 years of ministry, and then you'll have to go somewhere else to tell that new church those 2 years worth of things that you have to say, and then you have to leave again. Because you don't have – this is like the only way to stay long-term somewhere and be effective is to continually put in new things over and over and over into what it is that you're learning and growing in. And so I try to model that at that level. And then we try to hold each other accountable for it. So we'll read books together as a staff, which we haven't got to do much this year. We read one book, and I'll just be honest, it was a hard book,
dude. It was
to read, and honestly, it got to the point I was like, I'm not even sure I want to discuss this book because it was so hard to even get through. So we haven't got back into that rhythm of reading, but I mean, we'll post articles to each other. And
I was just about to say it's part of the values that we hold so near and dear to us, even though we know that we're not maybe reading a book as a staff right now and being transparent in that aspect, but we're always posting a podcast. We're always, hey, like I stumbled across this article while I was doing whatever. And as long as if you post something and I'm taking the time to read it or listen to those podcasts, or if I do the vice and it's vice versa, if it's flipped and you're taking the time to read it and listen to those things, then we know that, hey, maybe this idea is maybe kind of like off the beaten path on the way that we think, but what can we take away from it? And we have discussions about it. Mm-hmm. Like, because we understand that not everything that we read is going to be totally lined up in what we believe as a church. And that could be theologically, that could be, but what are the good parts that we can take from this and apply to our lives that's going to make us better?
Well, that's what we're doing in the book club that I've been doing. This is one of the new things that got opened up because of the Wednesday night decision. Yeah. In the book club, we're reading books that I don't 100% agree with. Yeah. And so I know some pastors that would make them very nervous to introduce their congregants
and squeamish too
into things where you're trusting them to be mature to go, listen, we're going to read this. Some of it I agree with. Parts of it I don't. Yeah. So can we take it and let it stretch us, wrestle with it? Because at the end of the day, then we become stronger in our convictions, or we've learned something new that we've never considered before or something like that. And so we never stop growing is just a huge part of the culture here at Southridge Church, because if we stop growing spiritually or we stop growing as leaders, then we will not have the capacity to help more and more people take their next steps on their faith journey. So therefore the church will stop growing as well. I've always told people, ever since we came up with these core values, it's probably been 6 years ago now, 7 years ago almost. Ever since then, I've always told them, the church will not grow numerically, which is one of our goals, because we want to see more people come to Christ and be part of the body of Christ.
And it expands our effectiveness
the more people we have here,
to lead people to a closer relationships.
It doesn't pat me on the back to have 1,000 people here. Yeah. It just means now I've got 1,000 people that we can equip to go and do ministry so we can be more effective. Yeah. So I've always told the church, we'll not grow numerically, though, if the people inside the church are not healthy spiritually. If they're not growing spiritually, we'll never grow numerically. A lot of churches have grown really, really fast numerically, but when they don't have the spiritual backing of it, it just ends up being another big crowd. You might as well be up there talking about whatever. If if you're not developing disciples in the process, then it doesn't matter how many people come. So the best way to grow your church is to make sure the people inside of it are as healthy as possible. And then healthy Christians, they convert new Christians because they understand how important evangelism is, how important, having these conversations is, and they're so filled up with God and the Holy Spirit and what's going on in their life, it just spills out to everywhere else, and the people that they're doing life with can't help but get caught up in it, and then that's how there's this new drawing to the church. So it does not start with a church health program that's like, hey, let's give away a motorcycle for Father's Day or something. Yeah, you'll get a big crowd on Father's Day, I promise you. If you give away a motorcycle on Father's Day, you'll see people you've never seen before.
But the next week they'll be gone.
It's short-lived. They'll be gone. Whereas if you'll focus on helping your people get super healthy spiritually, then you will see your church grow. Because first off, the Lord is not going to entrust more people to you if you're not going to properly take care of them.
Yeah.
If you're not going to care for their souls and disciple them, the Lord will direct people elsewhere. And so that's one of the things that you see in growing churches is you see the blessing of God and his trust in that church and that church leadership to say, here's one of my kids. I'm going to let you be the one to take care of them.
Yeah.
See, I mean, I don't just send my kids just anywhere. You don't just send your kids anywhere. We send them to places that we know are going to take care of them, and that's how God handles his kids.
Yeah.
He's not just going to send his kids just anywhere. I'm telling you, I think there's some churches the Lord ain't going to send his kids to because he can't trust that they're going to properly take care of his kids.
Yeah, that's good. So good. So just as a recap, culture is what's going to drive your organization, and your values are going to drive your culture. What you hold near and dear to you is going to influence the way that your organization is effective or not. I kind of look at it. I like the just kind of as we transition to get to the mystery meat. You look at the Lord's Chicken, Chick-fil-A.
Yep.
Their values are like customer service, and customer service, like everything about that, and quality, and a quality product. That's why every time you go there, there is at least 50 people there. It seems like. It's because whenever you go there as a customer, you know that you're going to be well taken care of.
Yep.
And you know that you're going to get a quality product, and it's going to be very fast and friendly service.
Yeah.
And that's the type of values that they have. And so you know that the culture there, every time you go, you know that you're going to be taken care of. You know that you're going to get great food, and customer service is just going to be through the roof.
Yeah. Yeah, they call it the value there is they call it second mile service, and they get it from the scriptures where Jesus says, if somebody at that time the Romans could make the Israelites carry their gear if they were a soldier or whatnot, and so Jesus says if someone tells you to carry their gear for a mile, carry it for 2 miles.
Yeah.
And so Chick-fil-A took that as their value, said we want to be second mile service type people.
Yeah.
But like, we don't want to just do, this is what everyone else is doing. The first mile is what you're obligated to do. The first mile is what Wendy's, McDonald's, Taco Bell, everybody's doing the first mile. It's that second mile service that not everyone's willing to do, and therefore that's why not everyone gets the same results as Chick-fil-A. The reason why they can be closed on 1 day a week and these other places have to stay open, some of them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, is because they're not doing the second mile service. Let's just be honest. There are certain restaurants you go to, and it's going to be what it is.
And it's well short of a mile of the first mile.
It just is what it is. But like Chick-fil-A is, their value is second mile service.
Yeah.
And that's why you're going to be treated like a king and a queen and princes and princesses every time you walk in there.
I know, dude.
Because they're going to make sure that you have an experience that the reason why so many moms like to take their kids to Chick-fil-A is because they know they're going to get some help there.
Yeah.
Like, hey, can I take that to your table for you or whatnot? Like, go to I'm not calling out any other fast food restaurants or nothing. I'm just saying most of y'all, if we went there and a mom had a baby carrier and a diaper bag and a purse and 3 kids and all this, they'd be like,
yep, figure it out.
Food will be right up. And that mom's going to take 3 trips to get to her table, drop everything off, go up and get the drinks, fill the drinks up, get that bag, go get her food, and then And at Chick-fil-A, they're going to go, no, I'm going to take care of you on that
Yeah.
for sure. And then they're going to come up with processes and things that help their staff live out that second mile service and things like that. And so that's a great example of a culture that's driven by a value that ultimately it ends up seeing results that other places don't see because they don't have they have values. I'm not saying these other places don't have values. They just put value on different things.
Yeah.
Right. So I mean, and that's fine. Your church doesn't have to have the same values as Southridge, but they do have to have values.
Yeah.
Because if not, like I said at the beginning, if you don't have values, intentional values, you will accidentally create a culture based only about what you allow. Right. So just your culture becomes just what everyone does that you don't do anything about.
Yeah.
And so it's a really accidental culture, and that's how you slip into a lot of really unhealthy type things. Like if you have someone on your team that every time your team is together, they're gossiping and negative and criticizing stuff. If you don't ever go and have that conversation with that person to say, listen, you can't do that.
Yeah.
We're not going to, like, if you have a problem, please come to me privately. If you don't do that by a year's time of that, everyone on your team will do it.
Oh yeah.
And the culture will be, well, we all just come in here and complain. That's what they'll say. That's what we do.
Yeah, we get together.
That culture was created because of your allowance, not because of your values, but just simply because of what you allow.
Yeah.
And those are the most toxic cultures because no one just accidentally stumbles into healthiness in any arena of life. No one just accidentally gets healthy as an organization. No one accidentally gets physically healthy. Like, we didn't just wake up and be like, wow, look at this bicep. Didn't have that yesterday. Like, it just doesn't happen. No one accidentally gets into health whatsoever. So if your culture is created simply by the things that you allow, your culture is headed for a lot of heartache, a lot of long nights, and a lot of hard conversations, and probably not a lot of success.
Yep. Good stuff. Good stuff. Man, today's a good episode, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is a good one. Not that they're all like not good. Like they're all good, but today's a good one. Like y'all should have taken notes. Go back and re-listen and take the notes.
Yeah.
Uh-oh. Yes.
This is one of yours?
Yeah, it's one of the new ones. Okay.
Oh, new one.
Yeah, because I put a whole bunch of would you rather questions in there.
Oh, gosh.
So,
Okay.
Would you rather be forced to listen to the same 10 songs on repeat for the rest of your life or forced to watch the same 5 movies on repeat for the rest of your life? Now, this is not like always repeat, like it's always happening, but you can only listen to the same 10 songs or you can only watch the same 5 movies.
Same 10 songs.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, because you have the movie pass.
I like movies, and I like to watch movies. And I probably got 10 songs that would be so vastly different from one another that it would feel. And I probably am going to listen to music much less if I only have 10 songs.
Yeah.
I'm going to watch the same amount of movies no matter what, and I would not want it to be only 5.
Yeah.
So
I would have to do the 5 movies just because of the job position that I'm in.
Yeah.
I wouldn't. My tenure here at Southridge would be very short.
Yeah, every time you interview somewhere, be like, listen, but I've only got 10 songs that I do.
I'm a perfectionist at it, though. Like, these are going to be the best renditions of this song.
Well, that would be a lot like the example I gave earlier of someone that doesn't have anything to say unique after about 2 years.
Yeah.
That would be like, after I've played these 10 songs for 2 years, I'm going to have to go somewhere else to play these 10 songs. Or we're going to have to start doing like reggae versions of them, and then rap versions, and then rock versions, acoustic versions.
Well, could you imagine if you picked, like, you had to listen to the same 10 songs for the rest of your life, and before we started church service, I looked at you and I said, Scott, you got to go outside, Bubba. Like, we have songs on that are not on your list.
Yeah, so
you got to go wait outside, and we'll call you in whenever it's time to preach.
You can unintentionally get introduced to music, whereas movies are always going to be a choice.
Yeah.
But I would still choose the same 10 songs.
Yeah.
All day long, just because I love movies.
Yeah.
So.
I like to be entertained in both of those senses. I like music. I love music like tremendously, but I enjoy a good movie every now and then. And so that's a difficult would you rather.
Yeah, this is definitely one of those that I'm glad I don't actually have to do that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Thank you, hypothetical mystery meat. Alrighty, guys. Thank you so much for listening in today. If you enjoyed this episode, or maybe know somebody who just needs to hear about these things and is looking to grow in their leadership as well, share this with them and let them know about the conversations that we are having here on the Pastor's Potluck. Thank you so much, Pastor Scott, for today. Incredible. I can't wait to go back and listen to it as well. But y'all have a wonderful weekend, and we will see y'all next Friday for another episode. Thank you so much for listening in with us today. We really appreciate it. If you haven't done so already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. You can also follow us on social media, on Facebook, Instagram. And you can also watch the video version of this on YouTube as well. All you have to do is search up the Pastor's Potluck Podcast. From all of us here, we want to say thank you, and we'll see you next week.